Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Inka Vat. Now, today's show, we're going to look at the exchanges between Taiwan and US's militaries and governments, and in fact find that they are broader and deeper than you may realise. Also in the show, we learn about China's political warfare from Kerry Gershaneck, National Chengchi University professor and Taiwan fellow, and Thammasat University in Thailand senior research associate. Kerry was also a former director of strategic communications at the US Department of Defense. I'm joined today in our new studios by Stephen Tan, International Policy Advisory Group Managing Director. Steve, he is an expert in national security and international relations. And Tony Hu, former US Department of Defense Senior Director for China, Taiwan and Mongolia, former American Institute in Taiwan Security Cooperation Office Deputy Chief, and former Raytheon Company Taiwan Country Manager. Stephen, Tony, a very warm welcome to the show today. We start the programme with US media reports of Taiwan sending up to 500 troops to the US for training, while 200 more US troops will be sent to train Taiwanese in Taiwan. This report by Patrick Chen and Jaime Ocon.
Over 100 US troops may soon be on their way to Taiwan. That's according to a report by the Wall Street Journal. It would be the largest deployment of US troops to Taiwan since Washington broke off diplomatic relations in the 1970s. The report cited officials close to the matter, who say that the expansion of forces is part of a training program designed to enhance the combat readiness of Taiwanese troops. The news comes as China continues its military pressure around Taiwan. Taiwan's defense ministry reported that in a span of 24 hours, 37 Chinese warplanes and 6 naval ships were operating around the country. Of that group, 12 planes entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone. And although this space isn't the country's sovereign territory, it's used as a buffer zone for military purposes. The latest news of US-Taiwan military cooperation comes just days after reports that Taiwan's military would send almost 500 troops to the US for training. Defense officials say it's all part of an effort to bolster Taiwan's combat readiness. Patrick Chen and Jaime Ocon for Taiwan Plus.
That report by Patrick Chen and Jaime Ocon. Now, every year, Taiwan sends students to the United States for professional military education. As Alex Chen and Ed Moon report, Hu Jiaqi was one of them.
Clambering up a rope, diving from great heights, and hitting the bullseye. Taiwanese soldier Hu Jiaqi is never afraid to take on a challenge. She is just the second Taiwanese female graduate from the prestigious West Point Military Academy in the United States.
来到西点是代表国家，所以我看到其他人可能会躲在自己的舒适圈里面，我会觉得我必须要去做一些不一样的、特别的，去挑战自己，然后让世界看到台湾这样，就算只是一点点。
Taiwan lives under the constant threat of invasion from neighboring communist China, which claims the country as part of its own territory. Currently, only Taiwanese men undergo mandatory military service, but women can volunteer for the armed forces. Now back in Taiwan, Hu Jiaqi is preparing to head back to her army unit, where she can put her 4 years of training in the US to good use, and maybe inspire more women to follow in her footsteps. Alex Chen and Ed Moon for Taiwan Plus.
Stephen, if I can come to you now. So these sorts of stories are seldom, come out in the media. Why do you think that there have been a couple recently, including the Wall Street Journal?
Well, in terms of the Taiwan administration, the exchanges and the training programs, Taiwan administration has been keeping very, very low profile. When facing the media, including the international media, my understanding is that Taiwan administration tend not to respond, if at all.
So why is that?
Well, I guess we have the substantive exchanges and the training programs as they currently develop with the United States. And then why on earth do we have to make a big fuss out of it? But on the other hand, you see the Wall Street Journal's reports and many other mainstream medias reporting correctly on the ongoing and expanding training programs and the exchanges. And I think the United States has set a very clear objectives to enhance the relationship. Not just economic and trade relationship, but also the military relationship with Taiwan. But on the other hand, as to whether the United States is going to react and respond to China's threat on Taiwan, it has long been guided by the principle of so-called strategic ambiguity. But we all know that the principle of strategic ambiguity has become less and less ambiguous, and how the United States has been sending clear and loud messages to Taiwan and to China and to the rest of the world that there are something going on right now. And what's been going on is exactly what you see, the trainings, the exchanges, the enhancing the relationship as envisioned and empowered by various different acts that's passed by the Congress.
Tony, would you see this as less fear about provoking China?
Yes, I do, because previously the thought was the less China knows and complains, the more we can do with Taiwan. That is why we keep everything low key. It gives us a freedom of movement. Now I think the perception has changed, because I think United States have made a conscious decision. We no longer worry about China's complaint. We do what is good for U.S. interest. So now more and more become open, and I believe in and by itself is also a deterrent factor.
Stephen, do you, is that also your assessment? Is there a certain element, as you said, to be seen to be strengthening the military ties between the two nations? Is this actually sort of part of the information war?
Well, that's right. As I just pointed out, that the while enhancing the relationship, while doing the the exchanges and exercises on a military basis, somehow you need to send a clear and loud message to the whole world that this is what we've been doing, and it's provided and authorized by the laws of the United States. And I think Taiwan is not just on the receiving end, but we're in collaboration with the counterparts in the United States to defend our own nation. So I think this is purely authorized under the laws of the both country that we're doing. But I think you're right that it's also sending a loud and clear message that we're defending our own dear country. We're working with like-minded countries, including the United States. We're not just sending the signals and the ambiguous rhetorics. We're doing exactly what it is to defend our own country. And I think that doing something is important, but saying it out loud without fearing to antagonize China is another thing, and I think both are critically important.
Tony, so we've touched on the troop training, and also last summer, there was a exercise called Northern Strike led by Michigan National Guard. But let's move now to the academies. As we said in our report, there are Taiwanese that have been sent to West Point, one of the US's top military academies. Can you tell us, what sort of numbers are being sent there, and where else are they being sent?
The fact is, not only West Point, but in Air Force Academy and Naval Academy, United States invites Taiwan students, and United States invite Taiwan students to each year's class. So usually in a class of the academy, we have about 15 foreign students, and one of it is Taiwan. So in the West Point, Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, if you count 15 per year foreign student, there's about 60 foreign students total. So Taiwan is one of the few countries that the United States invites to every year to the academies. Same thing with the different level of professional military education, like Squadron Officer School and the Staff School and the war colleges. And this is so important, not only because they learned about leadership, management, theory of war, but also because they get an opportunity to interact with other countries' officers. And these other countries' officers who get selected to go to these schools are the cream of crop, the best of the best. So if you think about this, I know many Taiwan officers who are very intimate with the current leadership in Japan, in Korea, in the Philippines, their Air Force commander, the Navy commander. These are classmates of Taiwan students that went to school for a whole year together. They maintained a friendship. As a matter of fact, Minister of Defense, Cho, He's a graduate of Army War College, United States Army War College, and his name is on the Hall of Fame for achieving the top level officer. So,
Tony, let me just quote. This is how they bill themselves. This is West Point, the preeminent leader development institution, and President Washington, way back, in the 1800s, I think we're saying, he wanted to establish West Point as an institution devoted to the art and science of warfare to train and develop officers for the Army. And there's also, professional excellence and service to the nation as an officer in the United States Army. So you're right, this is really, as you said, cream of the crop.
Absolutely. And what it develops, it's not only a regular college, but it also teaches leadership, military bearing, and a lot of self-discipline. And the military school challenges to go further, where regular colleges, you just take the classes. So both physically, mentally, and also as the character building in the military schools, because they try to break you, and you have to survive it to move on.
Stephen, if I can ask you if you have an opinion on that. So we've talked about, Tony has talked about, the networking, I guess, having the connections, those human-to-human connections is obviously very important, as well as having those skills at the very top level.
Right. We're actually seeing the developments of the new generations of both countries working together, knowing each other much better, adding a little bit of more of a human touch on top of everything else. Imagine that a decade later, or 2 decades later, 3 decades later, when some of them become the leaders of the countries, Taiwan as well as the United States, you have sort of the building of that sort of sense of community within the young leaders of both countries. I think that helps a lot, and that helps to identify themselves and have the same goals and purposes. So I think this is part of the programs. When they started earlier last year, then they will be under the National Defense Authorization Act. There will be some military aid and assistance, and people then ask, what is this all about? Where did the money go to?
Yeah,
and I think big chunk of those money will go to the training. But training is not just the hardcore training, but training is also the building up and adding up the human touch for the new generations.
Stephen, tell us about the legal backdrop to this. As you mentioned, there's the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. Take us back a little bit from the Taiwan Relations Act.
Right. Well, Taiwan Relations Act, TRA as you all know it, is established the legal basis for the United States after the United States established the diplomatic relationship with China to help and facilitate Taiwan in its own defense. So all the military cell, as you see it for the decades, have been built based upon the Taiwan Relations Act. For the past few years, there have been a few additional sort of add-on acts, such as originally was called Taiwan Policy Act. Now the official name is called TERA, Taiwan Enhanced Resiliency Act.
And this is part of the NDAA?
This is part of the 2023 NDAA. Okay. And then the big chunk of it is really the exercises, training programs, and what you see on the screen, what you have envisioned for the past few months are pretty much under the TERA, under the 2023 NDAA, which provide very substantive programs to the military men and women here in Taiwan. And I think not just the sale of the weapons and the military cells, which are as well important, but also the training that has been established with the specific budget passed by the U.S. Congress and provided, and now you see the implementation, which I think adding the Taiwan Relations Act and the TERA and many, many other acts that have been put in place are in the phase of implementing in the next couple of months or a year, so which I think will really not just help Taiwan defend on its own, but also collaborate, between Taiwan and the United States and the rest of the world, facing the threat of other means of coercion, facing the threat of war, not just the military war, but also the technology war, and also the blockade and economic coercions, and all together. So I think we're coming together as a stronger country, working with the like-minded countries, with the provisions of all the budgets, all the enhancements that you can see in the next few months or years.
Tony, last question of this segment. We mentioned the NDAA. Now, for many years, Taiwan has wanted to either be invited as an observer or participate in RIMPAC, which is the essentially multilateral or regional exercises led by the US in the Pacific. This year's NDAA, is there anything different?
Actually, not much difference, because from the legislative side, from Congress has been recommending to the executive side, specifically Department of Defense, to invite Taiwan, because it's so important for Taiwan to understand when we have a multilateral exercise, when we have to work together on a defense scenario, how does that happen? What does it mean when we use certain terms in a warfighting scenario, and how do we identify friends and foe? And those important factors, if we ever have to defend Taiwan together, are practiced in these type of multilateral exercises. So the standard procedure is, if we want to invite a country to participate, 2 years prior, we invite them as observers so they can see the entire process. And then later on, 2 years later, they participate, and we have usually 3 planning meetings. They decide what each country wants to participate. We design a scenario and that type of things. So I'm very hopeful that Taiwan will be able to receive an invitation to go to the initial planning conference that's going to take place around October, November this year. And then the mid-planning conference in March, and in June, the final planning conference, and officially become observer and put that check in there, then 2 years later, and become part of the participant. And because this type of exercise, like I mentioned, the best way to exercise is unit level. When you send a whole ship, that's a unit level in the Navy term. So hopefully Taiwan gets that opportunity soon.
Okay, thank you. Now, US-Taiwan bilateral discussions at all levels take place multiple times a year to ensure that Taiwan and the US share information on strategic defense planning and operational integration. So at the strategic level, there are national security level Monterey talks and defense review talks, and these are hosted by the US Office of the Secretary of Defense. Further down from that, at the operational level, there are talks hosted by the US Indo-Pacific Command, which is responsible for China, Korea, and the entire Pacific all the way to the border with India. Then at the tactical level, there are meetings between the military services of Taiwan and the United States. For security assistance talks, they are related to arms sales and training, and discussions about defense capability shortfalls and solutions. Tony, could you take us through the structure of these military interactions from the strategic level down to the tactical and security assistance level?
Sure. I won't touch in the national level, where recently we saw the foreign minister and the secretary general of the NSC went to the United States, called Special Channel. When I was in the Pentagon, it's a classified program. So now even that's open, which was a surprise to me. But let me talk about the Monterey talk and the subsequent talks from the highest level. Monterey talk is an interagency talk. So U.S. National Security Council and the Department of State joins that talk as Taiwan's representative also. And it is run by the Department of Defense. And I managed that program for 2 years. I ran the Monterey talk and the Defense Review talk. Defense Review talk is just between MND and DOD, but Monterey talks is interagency. Certainly we talk about long term, what are the things that Taiwan should think about, like The year that I managed it, we wanted to make sure Taiwan has a succession plan in case of a decapitation attempt or the president gets harmed, who succeeds the president, vice president, and down on. We jointly.
So which year was this? Sorry, Tony.
That was 2005,
Right.
many years ago. And we jointly determined, even before the meeting, at the staff level, we work with MND, what are the issues. This is what United States is interested in seeing, and this is what Taiwan is interested in seeing, and we actually run a war game during Monterey Talk, a political military war game during Monterey Talk. So defense review talk is narrowed down to more defense levels, such as threat identification. What are the new threats that Taiwan is facing, and from that, where are the capability gaps to address those threats? And eventually, that kind of discussion results in what kind of system Taiwan should acquire to address that threat. So that's, like I say, in the strategic level. And operation level, hosted by Indo-PACOM, talk more about how to physically defend Taiwan. When we talk strategy, overall defense strategy, and what are the things that we hope Taiwan to pick up on and do in case of a defense scenario. So then at the service level, the Air Force, Army, Navy, they all have their own individual service level exchanges, and that gets down to tactical level, actual warfighting talks. How do you defend against the beach landing, for example? How do you, I suspect, I'm guessing now, the recent discussion most likely covers gray zone defense. As China takes on more gray zone activities, what do you do? So these are the type of meetings, the discussion topics we have with Taiwan. And as you mentioned earlier, on the security cooperation side, security assistance side, arms sales side, we also have different discussions and looking at how to request and what's the status of request. And also an important issue is the funding level, how much Taiwan is able to afford, both in terms of hardware purchase and training, as Stephen mentioned earlier.
And just one last question. How often do these sorts of meetings occur? Are we talking about, maybe twice a year? And also, how far back have they been going? Is it since 1970s?
It goes back quite a long time, in the 70s, and actually in the 80s. And the strategic level talks are once a year. The operational level talks are more often, and at the service level is more often. So
more often being?
Well, twice a year at least, and Monterey Talk and Defense Review Talk once a year. So because this higher level talk drives the discussion and the direction for the lower level talks. So it's all linked together. So as I finish the defense review talk, and there will be representative from Indo-PACOM in the meeting, so we will sit down and say, okay, let's implement this, this, and this. How are you going to do it? Okay, we're going to hold this, this, this. And invite Taiwan generals come over. Then we send service teams to Taiwan to discuss this. This is a little bit different from the actual technical training team, teach them how to repair, fix, and all that. It's more on warfighting.
Okay. Stephen, I mean, that is incredibly organized and structured. What do we know about how much Beijing may know about this?
Well, just before that, just add on to that. I think Monterey Talk and Defense Review Talk, as I understand that, at this moment is still classified. But it is just that the existence and the dates and the venues and the attendees of both sides are readily available and revealed to the public. Now, and of course, the defense talks will add on, the defense review talks will add on to other layers that the national security team, the State Department, and high-level officials attending, as you can see, the media for the past few weeks in Washington, D.C. I think Beijing is fully aware of that. It's just that Washington decided, as Tony just correctly pointed out, that not antagonizing China is of less importance or of no importance anymore, because you can't make China happy, or China's going to be unhappy anyway. but there is some, I suspect that from the U.S. perspective, there are some substantive benefits of reviewing the existence and certain details, but not the content of those talks. One of the things is that you send out a message loud and clear, as I just pointed out, that there is a strong and continuing relationship, ongoing relationship between Taiwan and the U.S. So I think China's assessment of that, I think China knows that, but then Washington reiterated repeatedly that there is no change in the current policy, so-called the One China policy as guided by the Taiwan Relations Act.
Stephen, the reason why I asked you was because in 2021, I think it was a CNN exclusive sit-down with Tsai Ing-wen. When this came out, as I said, it was a bombshell revelation. China reacted badly. They made their threats. And yet what we're saying is actually they've known about this for decades.
Right. I think China has known about the existence, as Tony just pointed out. It started in the 80s. It's been for 4 decades. I think China is no fool of not knowing the existence of the Monterey talks and defense review talks and all those dialogues between Taiwan and China, and the United States under the Taiwan Relations Act. The Tsai Ing-wen's review by CNN, she revealed a little bit about that, and I think at that time it was China was bombarded with the news, quote unquote, but actually China was fully aware of that. And now, if you look at the CNN interview, it's only about what, a year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's nothing new, and not just that, the whole world knows the existence of that. But I think the fundamental difference between now and then is that China is not the China before. And China's relationship with the rest of the world is different now. So you can't expect that the same old rule that it's been practicing for decades, like you can do what you do, but you don't speak out openly, and then you do this underwater, and then you don't make a big fuss of it. China would not be unhappy. It's no longer in practice because it's not practical and it's not even needed. So what I'm pointing out is that the whole situation and the circumstances have changed drastically, and the main driver of that change is Beijing. So Beijing should be fully aware of its responsibility and the reason for that, dynamic change in the structure of the relationship between Taiwan and the United States.
Tony, I know you want to respond to what Stephen just said. Can I also ask you also to address, this structure behind the scenes? What did it enable the US and Taiwan to do post Nancy Pelosi's visit?
Good question. Well, first of all, Xi Jinping changed the status quo. Okay, very important point. And
sorry, and by that you mean?
I mean the acts that he has taken, the more aggressive attitude against Taiwan and the more aggressive attitude toward the world, and more domineering posture toward Southeast Asia neighbors and Japan, he has changed the status quo not only across Taiwan Strait, but across Asia, across the entire region. Now, the type of interaction we just talked about, what does it do? One, builds trust. It is so critical to build trust. We tried confidence building measures with China for decades and decades. We have the similar talks. We have something called defense consultative talks with China every year, where we try to reduce tension.
The US and China.
The US and China, it hasn't worked, okay? But we continue to have them. And not only building trust with Taiwan with this type of structured discussion, but it also allows us to coordinate our response to activities. We have established communication channels in case something happens. We want Taiwan to understand what you should expect as far as response from the United States, and let us know what you're going to do. Okay, so we're not going against each other. And so this is the type of positive things that come from this type of coordination.
Kerry Gershaneck, a Taiwan fellow at National Chengchi University who worked in the US Department of Defense for almost 3 decades, says that China has been waging war against the US and Taiwan for decades. Beijing, he says, has perfected the art of political warfare, which is winning without fighting. Let's take a look.
To the Chinese Communist Party, everything is warfare. So we have political warfare, which consists of media warfare, psychological warfare, and legal warfare or lawfare. Then you have unrestricted warfare. Everything is couched in warfare because to the Chinese Communist Party, they are at war with us, and it is an existential fight. It's a massive apparatus with the United Front Work Department and with the Central Propaganda Department and so many other departments that are involved in it. The People's Liberation Army has a massive role in it. But it is a war that they are conducting. Until we understand that, Taiwan has picked up on this very well since 2018 or so. But in the United States now, it's beginning to pick up on it. But for the longest time, we were willfully blind to the fact that we were under attack.
What is the strategy that China has? What's their game plan for the US?
If you've been reading Xi Jinping's speeches and some of the secret ones that are, from some years ago that are have become public in the past year or two, basically Western ideals like democracy, freedom of speech, constitutions, those are all evil to the Chinese Communist Party. First and foremost, they want to destroy the United States. They want to destroy the concept in any other country's mind that our view of the world, our version of rights and law and constitutions is wrong, that it's the China model, it's the totalitarian People's Republic of China model that the other nations should adopt. So that's what their ultimate goal is.
And could you reflect on, Taiwan's defenses against this sort of political warfare? Is it good enough, do you think?
We've withstood this since 1949. And the economic coercion, the other ways that the PRC, the diplomatic strangulation, all the political warfare means that it has to demoralize you, to divide you, and to use their term, to disintegrate your society. You've held up well, and you've gotten stronger. You know your own history, why your laws were so weak. Because of the White Terror and other incidents that happened in the past. But you're beginning to overcome that tragic legacy and pass laws that are equivalent to, say, the Foreign Agents Registration Act in the United States, where you're actually requiring people to give evidence that they're working for the Chinese Communist Party. You're exposing them. You're getting better laws to help your law enforcement and counterintelligence officials to actually investigate more effectively and prosecute. You've got to do more on the laws that allow them to get longer jail sentences for your traitors, for those in uniform and in other positions who you catch and then convict for spying and being agents of influence for the Chinese Communist Party.
Do you see anything standing in the way of more progress, Professor? Perhaps, political consideration.
You've got a legislative yuan that's divided, just like America has a Congress that's divided. You have people who are elected officials who don't agree with taking a tougher stand against the PRC. They see the future being with the PRC. And as a government official over the years, I've talked with some of these people and they're absolutely convinced that if they can just unify, in their term, unify with communist China, they can change communist China. Well, look how well that worked out for Hong Kong. You understand one country, two systems is an absolute lie. It's not just nonsense. It is a massive deception operation to get you to get your guard down and get you to just walk in and peacefully to surrender your rights, your children's rights, your children's freedoms.
U.S. intelligence has found that China was considering the provision of lethal aid to Putin. Should that happen, what would be the consequences?
If Xi proceeds with supplying the ammunition and the weapons that he's been asked to supply by the Russians, that's going to be a clear sign that Xi's appetite for risk is increasing. On the really good side, if he does choose to do that, it's going to greatly accelerate decoupling with the People's Republic of China, which is long overdue by the West and the United States in particular. But the reality is, if he does choose to do that, it means he's also willing to take a chance on initiating a war in order to annex Taiwan. It's not just the marriage of convenience with Putin. This is all part of Xi's ideology. He sees what happened to the Soviet Union as very possibly happening to the People's Republic of China. So he cannot afford this time to let Russia fall again, to let Russia fail on the battlefields of the Ukraine again.
That was Professor Kerry Gershaneck of National Chengchi University. Now, what's being billed as the world's first sixth-generation stealth bomber was unveiled in the US in December 2022.
The B-21 Raider ushers in a new era. A bomber like no other. With stealth, advanced weapon systems, and an open systems architecture built into every element. This first ever sixth-generation aircraft pushes the limits of what's possible.
This bomber was mentioned by General Kenneth Wilsbach, commander of the US Pacific Air Forces, in comments about war over Taiwan. Wilsbach said one lesson of the 2022 visit by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was, "We've got to sink the ships should war break out." The general also suggested the US amass firepower in the region by arming drones, and that the new B-21 Raider would be helpful in our mission here. He's not alone on sinking ships being the priority in war with China. I spoke exclusively to Project 2049 Chair Randall Shriver, who is also a former US Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Indo-Pacific. He had this to say.
I heard Mike Gallagher say not too long ago, look, this isn't complicated. It's not necessarily easy, but it's not complicated. We need to be able to sink a lot of ships. And, you know, when you look at that equation, how you get people across the Taiwan Strait, it can't be done really through airlift. It just, you can't scale quickly enough to get enough people across the strait. It has to be ships.
Tony, so Randall Shriver went on to talk about Taiwan's need for the land-based anti-ship missiles, which it is creating itself as well as buying in, as well as unmanned aerial and underwater drones. Going back to the General's comments, is it usual for the Air Force to be responsible for sinking ships?
Actually, it's not. Usually sinking ship is the role of the Navy. Our Navy fighters can carry anti-ship missiles, and certainly our submarines is out there hunting ships. So at that, currently, the only aircraft that has anti-ship capability is B-52, who can launch Harpoon missiles. However, all the new generation aircraft now can launch the long-range anti-ship missile, the AGM-158s, the stealth missiles, and also that includes B-21. Also, we have developed a new weapon system called Quick Sink. It's a glide bomb that can go out there and sink ships. It's a 2,000-pound bomb that's much cheaper and much quicker in killing ships. These are all new roles of the Air Force have picked up. Our aircraft has been optimized to not only doing air-to-air, air-to-ground, but air-to-sea recently. Because China has the largest Navy, they do have a lot of ships, and for them to try to annex Taiwan, they must put feet on the ground, and the only way to do so is through ships. So as long as we can kill their ships, they can get their feet on the ground in Taiwan. So it is an important mission that General Washback has identified, and I'm certain we are practicing it, and I believe Air Force can do a lot more damage than Navy quicker and faster.
Explain to us this concept, which we hear about a lot, a military term, anti-access area denial. So what is it that that China was trying out after Pelosi's visit?
Well, China's objective is isolate Taiwan. So in case they decide to attack Taiwan, they want to be able to prevent Taiwan's friends from coming. So they want to prevent the friends have access to the area, and they want to deny the entire area around Taiwan from foreign troops entry. So this is China's strategy. Therefore, the United States have developed a counter strategy to overcome this by gaining access, such as the recent agreement with the Philippines. And we are prepositioning our weapons, our storage, fuel, and we are signing more access agreements with different countries, including the countries, island countries around the Pacific, and with Japanese, where the beer-based islands with just a runway, we have identified where we can actually bat down fighters quickly using the Agile Combat Employment, ACE. This concept we have been practicing for about 2 years, where one of the things that 2049's CSIS war game identified was the center of gravity for the United States are the bases in Japan and Guam. If China hit those and killed all these planes, then the fight will be longer. The fact is, we have, well, I should say United States have developed tactics where we disperse at the first sign of strategic warning. When they're massing troops, those squadrons of fighters will disperse to different places, the places that we have access, and we will fight from there. And also, other countries are also looking at some of these places. So the coalition forces will be able to already inside the war zone. So we try to counter the anti-access area denial during peacetime. So we're already inside. Therefore, try to make that strategy ineffective.
Stephen, let's talk more about those islands. And so the General had talked about many, many islands that they're spread across. Tell me about, that strategy, how significant that is.
Well, I don't want to speculate on what it really means by many, many islands that the U.S. Air Force is going to spread crews and aircraft across. But as you all know, Japan has many, many islands, and the Philippines has many, many islands. But we here in Taiwan also have many, many islands. Taiwan Island, Penghu, Kinmen, Mazu, and Lüdao, Liuqiu, Dongying. We have so many islands. So I really don't want.
Do you see building up of U.S. presence?
Well,
assets there?
I don't know. I don't want to speculate on this remark. But then I think anyone can find ways to correctly and interpret what he representing the U.S. force here in this region has really trying to achieve. But I think to the bottom line is that I think it interact with the dynamics of this region geopolitically. I think remaining the maximizing flexibilities of deploying various different resources to the right place seems to be the way to go.
And what Tony said about, the strategy against that is to, in peacetime, to have the presence there. It sounds like a very good strategy. Yep.
The F-22 fighters from Alaska is at Clark Air Base, Philippines for exercise. So that's part of our regular getting ready and we let the whole world know, mainly China know, we have this capability. We can quickly bring advanced fighting powers into the region to help defend Taiwan.
Tell us a bit more, Tony, about this B-21 Raider. Is it truly the 6th generation stealth bomber? And what does that mean exactly? What does a digital stealth bomber mean?
Well, 6th generation is a type of weapon system that can be optionally manned. That means it can fight the war either with a pilot or without a pilot. So B-21 is the first aircraft that has extensive artificial intelligence building. So certain mission, the pilots can be in there managing its weapon system plus the unmanned aircraft that it's bringing along, or it can fly unmanned by itself to accomplish certain dangerous missions. So it's 6th generation because it's pilot optional. Our next generation fighter is also optionally manned. It's also designed to be able to fly on mission by itself or fly with man in it, but it's taking a lot of unmanned aircraft with it. So this is what's called man-unmanned teaming, MUM-T. So B-21 is the first aircraft that's fully integrated for MUM-T, man-unmanned integration. So in the future, when we go into combat, there will be extensive unmanned assets going in with our manned assets. The unmanned, they will be stealthy. They'll be the first wave going in, take out the defenses to allow other aircraft to come in.
Okay, now in conclusion, Stephen, do you believe that, because we talked about the integration and interoperability of US and Taiwan troops, do you believe that there will be enough integration, enough training, preparation before 2027, which is the year that Xi Jinping has asked his military to be capable to take Taiwan?
Well, I think we have a sense of urgency here, but the United States also has a sense of urgency in marking 2027 as the year where Xi Jinping believes that PLA is ready, or PLA has told Xi Jinping that they will be ready. But I would like to use the word synchronize as opposed to integrated, because I think Taiwan and the United States are synchronizing as we speak militarily, and I think the process is going to be expedited. I have no doubt that, and fully confident that by or before 2027, it's going to be synchronized in the fashion that we have better capability and more confidence because of the better capability to defend China while facing the threat and the military coercion anytime by 2027 or before or beyond.
So the distinction between integration, synchronization, why?
Well, I think synchronizing in terms of that, we have our own military capability and the personnel, but we have to work hand in hand in a seamless way with our counterparts, which is the United States Army, Navy, and the Air Force. That's what I call synchronization.
Hello, I'm Ian Kavat of Taiwan Talks. We just discussed how deep the interactions are between Taiwan's military and the US's. What we want to know from you is, can the US and Taiwan militaries synchronize enough by 2027, the date that Xi Jinping has ordered his military to be capable of taking Taiwan? Can you leave your comments in the YouTube comment section below? And if you liked this show, please hit subscribe. Take care and see you next time.